Quiet on Set by Joshua Wagner.
All right, quiet on set, everyone. Gather around and listen up.
The set manager called out to all the actors and stagehands who had been bustling around trying to get every bit of last-minute work done that they could.
This is it. After this, you guys are on your own.
That might sound weird in any other kind of situation for a set manager to say to the cast and crew, but this wasn't any other kind of situation. See, where we are now is on a very unique project. I was, at the time, an actor playing one of the main characters on a film called Finding Lost Village. The project was the brainchild of some horror author and this YouTuber who's famous for playing a bunch of survival-type horror games. About a year before, they got together and came up with the idea, which was to bring a survival horror game to life. In the end, the YouTuber got in touch with some friends he made in the film industry. What they came up with was that they'd turn the author loose and let him work independently for the following year and have no contact with the YouTuber. The idea being he wouldn't have any idea what to expect beyond the very basic premise. Aside from the YouTuber, he'd be bringing a friend that he'd occasionally feature on his channel to participate with him. The hook was that they were both extremely jumpy, and it was well beyond easy to get them to panic. And on top of all that, the author in question, let's just say he pulled out every stop his twisted mind could come up with. The setting, as you may have suspected by the name, was in a village. But what village exactly? Well, that's where things get really interesting. It was this abandoned village way out in the middle of Eastern Europe. The rumor was the entire population just suddenly vanished without a trace overnight. But that didn't explain what we found when we got there. Like the huge ship washed up on shore just a little ways from the town, or the shops and houses that had been burned all over the village. This whole thing seemed weird. But that's what was so great about it. Just being there made us all incredibly uncomfortable. But we, and by we I mean the actors and stagehands and the rest of the production crew, all had the time to get used to it, to acclimate. The YouTuber and his friend didn't. They'd be coming in fresh and had no idea what was going on. I ended up there because of random chance. I'd met the author, the guy basically running the show, when he came to meet a friend of his at a haunted house I'd been working at. It was one of the actors that worked out front, setting the atmosphere and getting everyone hyped up before they went in. He saw me, apparently liked my performance, and asked if I'd been interested in a project as one of the main character actors. I said yes on the spot. And a year later is where you find me, standing on set and listening to the set manager. You may be wondering where the author is in all this. Well, he was standing right next to me in a costume of his own, having taken up the role of the monster who'd be tormenting the YouTuber and his friend for most of the time. Like I said before, he'd pulled out every stop in his twisted mind. The costume was nightmarish, mostly black, like something halfway between a shadow and a person. The eyes had soft white LED lights that could turn off and on to make them stand out in the darkness. It was just absolutely unsettling to look at, even in the light of day. I, on the other hand, was there to play the maître d' of the pub that would be the central location for the story, and would also be the one to basically introduce the YouTuber and his friend and kick the whole thing off. Well, anyways, back to the set manager for now.
It's 0 hour, everyone. You've all done great up to this point, so let's keep that going and make sure this goes as smoothly and painlessly as possible. Any questions?
She asked before the end of her speech.
Yeah, I got one,
the author of all the people said, raising his hand above his head like he was in grade school.
Oh God, what now, David?
The set manager asked, trying to hold back a grin.
Yeah, I was just wondering,
he mumbled as he pulled his mask off. I was wondering, he mumbled as he pulled his mask off. Who do I complain about repeated sexual harassment? That guy over there keeps asking me to suck his toes, and I can't work under these conditions, he said as he pointed over at me.
Dave, shut up and put your mask back on,
Sarah the set manager told him as she suppressed a chuckle. Yes, ma'am, he said as he pulled up the mask back over his head. I'm still not sucking anyone's toes, though, he added through it as he wiggled into place. Got me working with a pervert over here. Dave, stop! I laughed, swatting him on the shoulder. You got your highlights charged up? I asked, causing him to click them on and off quickly to check. Yep, all set here, he told me as he adjusted a few bits and pieces of his costume. I'm gonna go give that secret passage one more check before they get here. Make sure none of the doors stick or something, he told me as he retreated back into the pub, apparently entering through the hidden door in the room behind the bar. He'd insisted that a whole network of secret doors and halls would be installed all over the place to make it seem like he could seemingly move from one place to another in an instant. And when the production team had told him how hard it would be, he volunteered himself to help build them. And they got built. I think having that guy on set was a big part of what had us all working together so well. The man had a cheery demeanor that gave us all a little extra kick to keep us going. The pub tunnel works! He suddenly shouted from the building across the street as his head popped out of one of the shop windows. Okay, well everyone, we should follow his example, Sarah spoke up, bringing our attention back to her. Let's start getting on our marks before they get here. I just got the call and the boat's headed this way. Should be here in about an hour. Once she said that, I could start to feel the butterflies in my stomach start to flutter nervously. I'd never been a part of anything so big and I didn't want to screw it up. I'm gonna go get ready in the pub, I told Sarah. How's my outfit look? Just fine, sweetie. I'm gonna check on a few things, then I'm gonna go get ready too, she said as she left the opposite way. On my way to the pub, I pulled out my phone and opened the surveillance app they installed on it. It was linked to all the cameras hidden around the village, so the whole cast and crew could know where the YouTuber and his friend were at any given time. Dave really did think of everything, it seemed. Okay, there they are, I said to the rest of the actors in the pub with me as one of the cameras on the riverbank caught them stepping off the boat. Looks like they're going to try and explore the boat first. Oh, look, Dave's already there, I said when I saw him flash his highlights at the camera and wave before giving us a thumbs up. Hey, use your phone to bring up the stream of their cameras. I want to see what happens in there. Steve, get your ass over here! Dan, the YouTuber, shouts at his friend as they creep around the bottom of the ship. What? Steve hisses back, almost tripping over something in the failing light. Are you already scared? We just got off the boat then. Nah, mate, look. This isn't a set piece. This is a real goddamn ship. Was this already here? Better have been. There's no way this was in the budget. So they what? They found a place with a shipwreck and... What's that shit? Welding equipment laying all over the ground? Stephen asked as he shines his light at the mess surrounding the ship. I bloody well bet, Rav. Dan sighs as he looks at the massive metal structure looming over him. I bet there's something important in there. Let's look for a way up. What? No. Dan, no, you're going to climb up there and fall and break your neck. Or your arsebone. And we'll have to call this whole thing off. I'm going to break my arsebone. You're worse than my mum. Dan says to Steve as he pulls his way up a rope ladder he found on the other side of the ship. You stay down there then. He tells Steve with a grunt as he kicks and pulls his way over to the edge of the bow. Oh yeah, great, awesome. Just leave me down here to fucking die, I guess. Steve complains as Dan looks around. Dan, help! Steve suddenly screams from his place on the ground. Stephen, you just scared the shit out of me. What the hell's wrong? Dan snapped at Stephen from the edge of the ship. Dan, there's something down here with me. Something in the woods. You almost gave me a fucking heart attack. Chill, mate. It's probably a deer or something. Oh, now wait. This is Eastern Europe, isn't it? Probably like a goat or something. These people love their goats. God help them. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Wait, I'm fucking terrified of goats. You ever seen the eyes on them things? Oh my god, this is amazing. They're bigger chicken shits than I could have imagined. I whispered to myself as I sat back and watched them stumble around in the dark. You think this is a bit much for them? Sarah asked as she watched from beside me. They aren't what you would call hard men, you know. No turning back now, I answered with a shrug. Oh wait, shh. Look, Dave's sneaking up behind Steve. Doesn't have a clue. Dan, I think we should try and find the village now. It's getting too dark to see anything around here. Steve called up from the deck of the ship. Meh. The sound of a goat suddenly broke the quiet from just a few feet behind Steve, sending him into a wild panic.
Dan, there's a goat! God damn, there's a goat down here! Help!
He screamed and shrieked up at Dan as the cameras attached to his chest whipped around chaotically.
Jesus, Dan, I think I shit myself!
I could hear Steve say from my place in the hidden compartment towards the front of the pub, waiting to sneak up behind them once they started to think no one was there.
Well, now this is nicer than I expected,
Dan mumbled to himself as they made their way further inside.
You think we can actually, get a pint in here?
Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? My nerves already shot to shit, Steve said with a huff as I listened to them wander around inside the pub. That's when I cracked the hidden door just a little and waited for my cue.
Anyone in there?
Dan shouted as he craned his neck to look around the corner to the back room. And that's when I pushed the button rigged to knock the glass cup over that was resting behind the bar. It crashed to the floor and shattered into pieces, Dan and Steve both jumping back and squealing in shock.
Fuck me, what was that?
He asked in a panic as they both leaned over to check the side of the bar. Welcome, gentlemen, to Hobbs End Pub, I said from a few feet behind them in my best Eastern European accent as they both still leaned over the bar.
Oh, fuck you!
Dan shouted once their terrified screaming died down and he caught his breath. Can I interest you in a drink or two, perhaps?
Nah. Where the hell do you come from?
Dan shrieked as he scampered around to the other side of the bar for cover.
Maybe something to eat then? We have a fine assortment of pork.
I asked again, easing my way around the bar, brushing my hand over the stools as I walked.
No, vegetarian,
Dan stuttered nervously.
No, I don't eat, food,
Steve added, almost in a panic.
No, come, I insist,
I told him as I leaned over one of the tables and sat them down.
Ribs. You look like you would just love our ribs,
I said excitedly as I clapped my hands together.
You wait here while I get your food, yes? How's it going?
Sarah asked once I joined her in the kitchen area. Great. I think they're both about to have a coronary already. I really laid the creepy on thick. Just wait for this next bit, I chirped excitedly as I gathered up the food.
Oh yeah, that bit.
Oh my god, I can't wait to see this, Sarah whispered, giddy with anticipation.
Oh, look,
Jamie just showed up to do his thing, I hissed as I tapped Sarah on the shoulder. Jamie being an abnormally tall, almost skeletal-looking man with a terrifyingly deep voice who was playing the hotel director, which was also one of the best ideas Dave had come up with, if you ask me. But more about that later. We both watched the camera feed from the kitchen as Jamie stepped up from the front porch of the pub, the boards having been deliberately sabotaged to creak horribly when he walked across. And creak they did. As he stepped up and the first groan of the boards rushed into the pub and into the ears of Dan and Steve.
Steve? Dan?
They said to each other quietly as each following step made another sharp creak slither across the room, leaving them both completely petrified in their chairs. And the door opens as Jamie ducks beneath the frame to step inside.
Ah, it would appear the rumors are true,
he said in his booming voice as he laid eyes on Dan and Steve.
Unexpected guests in our humble village,
he thundered on, faking his own Eastern European accent as he spoke. It took everything we had for me and Sarah to not burst out laughing as we watched Dan and Steve frozen in place, cowering under this spindly giant. I took that as a chance, so I grabbed their plates and drinks and slipped out of the kitchen.
Steve, that giant bastard's part of this thing, right? Sir,
You both look like you could use some rest. I run a modest hotel. Well, the only hotel in our little village. It would be my pleasure for you to stay there,
Jamie sternly suggested as he leaned down and placed his hand on their table.
Not before they've had their chance to eat,
I made sure to blurt out after I snuck up behind them whilst they were distracted by Jamie. It almost killed me to stay in character when they both almost flipped out of their seats from the jolt.
Oh my fucking god, where do you keep coming from?
Dan shrieked, almost knocking the table over.
I have brought food and drinks for you and your friend,
I responded cheerfully as I set the dishes down in front of them.
Please, eat,
I told them as I slowly pushed the plates closer. But instead of leaving them to eat in peace, me and Jamie just stood over them in silence to make them as uncomfortable as possible. As they both stirred awkwardly, I made sure to hold my eyes as wide open as possible, just to screw with them, which seemed to be working.
You think we could have a moment to...
You should try it,
interrupted Dan, giving his plate another small nudge.
No need to suffer through an empty stomach, yes? It is very good. We raise wonderful pigs here in the village.
Okay then. Let's give it a go.
Dan sighed as he picked on one of the ribs and took a bite.
Not bad that.
He hummed as he chewed on the meat. And that's when I took the chance to start my bit.
You know, they say that pig tastes very close to human flesh. That is why some call human meat long pork.
And there it fucking is,
Dan groaned, dropping the half-eaten rib back to the plate.
Steve, let's get the hell out of this,
he said as he tried to stand from the chair, but Jamie forced him to sit back down, with his tennis racket-sized hands, just like we had rehearsed.
Odd thing is that today so many people worry about animals we make our meat from, that they are not allowed to suffer. But on the other hand, in some places, they say the more something suffers before it dies, the more tender and better tasting meat it is,
I said as I stood over them, letting my voice get more and more ominous as I spoke.
But who knows?
I added, giving the table a hard slap and letting my voice lighten up again.
Maybe it's all just superstition. Go, eat. Then follow dear Mr. Oleg. He will take you to a fresh hotel room.
I told them before I turned and strolled slowly back to the kitchen.
Oh my god, you nailed it!
Sarah whispered excitedly as the door closed behind me.
We might have to clean up behind them after that, you creepy bastard. Right?
I said back, almost shaking triumphantly. They're gonna crap their intestines out when Dave really starts to lay into them. Let's see how they're handling Jamie. Picking my phone back up and opening the camera monitoring app. By the time I switched over to the right camera, they were both an absolute wreck. Their hands were both visibly shaking as they hustled to eat their food and leave as fast as possible. But Jamie was still looming over them with a menacing look on his face.
Steve, hurry the fuck up so we can get out of here.
Dan hissed across the table as he struggled to scoop the food off his plate.
Okay, I'm gonna let the stage guys know they're headed to the hotel,
Sarah said once Dan and Steve finally left the pub.
Oh, this is gonna be so good.
I watched as she bounced away cheerfully, humming to herself as she left the kitchen. If you love your job, I guess, a voice suddenly spoke from behind me.
Gee, oh my god, Dave, you scared the hell out of me.
I groaned when I turned to see him in that horrifying costume of his.
How the hell did you do that?
I asked, wanting to know how he can always just pop up out of nowhere without a sound. Well, I spent the better part of a year running up and down this place, learning what boards creak and pop, which ones shift and groan. I literally built hidden passageways all over this place. Oh, and the soles of this thing are crep rubber, he explained proudly, picking up his foot to show me the shoes that he had made to leave strange, inhuman tracks. Yeah, I guess that would help. Sadistic bastard. I chuckled as we watched the camera feed together. So you gonna mess with them some more? Nah, I want to take it easy the first night. Lull them into a false sense of security, he answered. And I want some rest too. It's gonna be hard work stalking them around this place the whole time. Sarah's gonna get the stagehands to move a few things around tonight. You should get some sleep too. Then we'll be back down here tonight anyway. Yeah, I am kinda tired, I said as I gave the screen one last look. You sure you don't need me for anything before I head out for the night? I asked as I popped the switch to open the secret door in the kitchen that led to my sleeping place. See you tomorrow. Or maybe not. Goddamn ninja. Okay, let's see what the YouTube Stooges are up to, I said to myself the next day after waking up. By the looks of it, they didn't get much sleep at all. They both had this look that they'd been up all night waiting for us to screw with them or something. Yes, I whispered, knowing that would make them even easier to spook.
I haven't seen that giant sorry bastard all morning. I just know he's waiting to jump out from fucking behind something.
Dan barked at Stephen as they finally came marching through the door to the pub.
Oh, shit, it's that creepy Hello? So how the hell do we get out of here?
He asked as he walked up to where I'd been standing behind the bar.
Leave? Oh, but you have both just arrived, I answered, clapping my hands together. I think you have not even seen the old town hall building yet. I don't give a shit about sightseeing now. The old town hall building is a very nice place,
I interrupted, making sure to direct them towards the part of town like I was supposed to.
Some food before you leave, perhaps? I think fucking not,
Dan blurted out before turning back towards the exit.
I don't know. I could eat,
Steve interjected, not moving from his spot.
Got any tea by any chance?
Oh, that's lovely there. Steve sighed as he had a taste of the tea I'd brought him. As they sat there sipping at the tea, I took a chance to go into some of my rehearsed dialogue, to inject some tension into the day that they had ahead of them.
So good to have no guests. In the old days, we would have many people from all over come to visit our small town, see the old buildings, meet the friendly villagers. But now...
I paused as I paced around the table where they sat.
Well, I'm sure you'll understand once you see,
I said, knowing the pub was just out of sight of the village proper, so they hadn't been able to see the state of things. Half the place was burned to a crisp, homes just as they were, all the possessions and furniture left behind. Dave really did pick a great location. Just walking around the place was so unsettling. Needless to say, I was pretty happy I'd get the chance to spend most of the time at the pub, a safe distance away from and out of sight of all that.
Why? What happened there?
Steve asked, his cup of tea stopping just shy of his lips.
Didn't you read the thing I sent you before we came?
Dan asked, sounding a little annoyed.
I skimmed it. Oh, fucking, of course, Dan sighed. Rumours that everyone in this village just up and vanished. Poof, no trace of them. Other than this place, no explanation. Nothing except... Except what?
Stephen asked, leaning in closer over the table.
There's some people saying they were here, right before everyone disappeared. But the story they told makes it seem like they were just making it up for their 15 minutes of fame. Some nonsense about conspiracies and monsters, and you couldn't just have read the bloody email, could you? Hey, where's the creepypasta off?
By then, I'd used their being distracted to quietly slip away unnoticed, just to creep them out a little bit more. Still listening from the kitchen, I waited until they finally worked up enough courage to leave before I walked out to clean the table. I already knew they weren't going to be very far. At least, not during the day. The plan was that they'd wander around during the day for a little while, and then when nothing happened, they'd come back to the pub. And that's when I'd clue them in on the strange phenomenon that things tend to change around here at night. Which really meant stagehands would run around and stash certain things they'd need to advance just before nightfall. A crowbar to pry the door open here, a lost diary page there. And as a bonus, Dave wrote the diary pages himself, so they were extra creepy and disturbing. After a little while, I'd accidentally let my mind wander until... Oi! My insides all clenched up from the surprise of Dan suddenly sticking his head through the door to the pub.
Meant to ask, what's up with the giant ship?
Fighting to pull myself together and putting on my fake accent, I finally answered.
Ah, yes, the ship. Unfortunately, nobody knows. It just appeared on the shore one day. But from what I have heard, there are many strange things about that old ship.
I would be careful of it if I were you.
Yep, fucking knew it. Steve! Steve! They got some shit going on with that ship. Let's go before it gets all dark and fucking terrifying, he shouted over his shoulder and out the door. They headed back to the ship. I alerted Sarah as I watched their journey from their chest cameras as they hiked the trail back towards the ship. They're probably about to find the shrine, I added excitedly, knowing that Dave had planted a weird, religious-looking altar to match his costume in one of the rooms of the ship. Oh, does Dave know? Should I tell Dave? Already on the way, he replied almost before I could get the words out. You or Sarah get some of the stagehands to go cut that rope ladder whilst they're up there. You know the plan, he added before I heard the click of him switching off his comm, meaning he was probably getting close to earshot of them. The plan he was referring to was that a stagehand would take one of those long... what are they called again? One of those things used to trim tree limbs. You pull the rope and it closes the snipper thing on the end. Whatever. They take one of those and cut the ladder off the ship. And on the ship Dave had left a message that said something like, "Pray to the river god in your time of need." The idea was that they wouldn't have a way back down, so they wander around the ship until they figure out that they have to go back to the altar and pray to it for a way off. Then a stagehand throws a new rope ladder up onto the deck. Dave said that it was an important part. Something about making someone sincerely pray to a god for help that they don't believe in or know anything about, and the stressful effect on the mind. I still remember what he said when he was explaining it. You can't just press a button to pray this time. They have to actually do it. Get on their knees, bow to this shrine, and ask a mysterious god to help them out of an actual predicament. They're gonna be really stranded on that ship. That part isn't fake. And then they'll pray to this god, and then they'll have an answer to their problem. And that's gonna get in their heads. Just you watch. The way he'd built it up really had me looking forward to it, so I was fixed on the screen, shifting back and forth from their chest cams to the one surrounding the ship, just to make sure I could watch from every angle. God, I'm out of shape, Steve groans as the ship finally comes into view. Can't wait to get back to the pub, have some more of that tea. What do you think that was? I didn't ask. Earl Grey, maybe? Nah, probably jasmine, I bet. Dan answers as he hikes his way ahead of Steve. Good though, wasn't it? Oh shit! Forgot about that. Dan sighs when he sees the rope ladder hanging on the side. Pain in the arse. What's that? Oh yeah, Steve says as he walks up beside him. Well, up we go, I suppose. Come on, up. Dan says as he helps pull Stephen onto the deck. Let's see what we can find in this creepy-ass boat. Got your torch on you? Steve asked as he heaves, trying to catch his breath. Probably gonna need them in the lower levels. Yeah, somewhere in there. Dan answers as he digs through his backpack. These ought to give us just enough light to jump out of somewhere and scare us off to death. Got any food in there? Stephen suddenly asks before Dan closes up the bag. No, I don't have any food in here. Are you mental? Just saying I could do with a snack right now. Steve argues back. Well, I don't. They said they'd be taking care of the food. Son of a bitch. They did that so we'd have to go to the damn pub every time we want something to eat. You think so? Steve asked, shining his light down to the lower decks of the ship. Makes sense, I guess. It took them a while, but eventually they gave in and made their way down to lower levels. With shaking hands, they aimed their lights down the halls and into the empty rooms as they explored the depths of the ship. And then, finally... Holy shitting hell! Stephen! Get your ass over here and look at this! Dan called over to Stephen, who was nosing through another room to the side. What? Don't freak me out like that! Oh, holy shitting hell is right! The hell is that? Steve blurted out once he reached Dan. Looks like an idol or something. Shrine, maybe? You think? Dan asked as he looked the ominous fixture over. I think this is starting to give me an ulcer, I swear to bloody God. Maybe there's something in there that tells us what we're supposed to do. Steve thinks out loud as he begins to search the room. Nah. Well, with this, look at that. Whatever that thing is on the altar. Fuck that. Dan says, pointing his light at the creature looming over them as they stand in the dark room. I'm going to check a few more of the rooms and then I'm going to get off this ruddy boat. As they explored the rest of the ship, I watched with Sarah as the stagehand clipped the tops of the ropes that held the ladder in place. Now this should be good, I heard Sarah chuckle from beside me. But I never turned away from the screen as they walked into the room where the note was. Oi, look over here. There's a piece of paper with some words written on it, Stephen says as he enters the room. Most people would call that a note, Steve. There's always a bloody note or some journal or some kid's creepy-ass crayon drawings, Dan mumbles as he follows in behind. Well, what's it say? Says, in your time of need you must pray to the god of the river. Oh God, I bet it's that idol thing back there, isn't it? Steve groaned as he read the note. No way I'm praying to that thing. Wouldn't ask it for a sandwich if I was starving with a tapeworm. Dan snapped as he took the note from Steve to read it for himself. It has to mean something else, I think. Let's go back to the pub and figure this out. Dan? Where's the ladder? What? The bloody fuck do you mean, where's the ladder? Better be right where we left it. Dan responds as he walks up to see what Steve is talking about. Oh, you've got to be fucking kidding me! Dan shouts as he looks down to see the cut ropes where the ladder used to be. We're stuck up here, aren't we? Stephen asks, alarm creeping into his voice. Dan? Dan? I'm about to lose my shit, Dan said with a trembling voice as he looked around feverishly for a way out of his current situation. We spent a long time watching them pace back and forth across the deck, occasionally glancing over the side. We watched as the realization began to set in. The realization that they were really trapped on that ship. How long do you think it'll be till they figure it out? I asked Sarah as she peered over my shoulder at the screen. Who knows? But don't they play those games all the time? Like with the puzzles and stuff. Maybe it's just taking a little longer because it's, real? She told me as her eyes stayed fixed on the screen. Just give them a chance. Look, Steve's standing up, I said, needlessly trying to get Sarah's attention since she was already watching the same thing I was. Dan, I think I have an idea. You ain't gonna like it, though. Don't you even say the words, Jump. The terrible things I'll do to you, Stephen, I swear to God. Dan warned as he picked his head up off his hands. What? No? I meant, remember that note? What it said. Gimme, Steve said, extending his hand. It said we had to pray to some sort of river god or something. The thing on the shrine. You gotta be shitting me. I don't want to pray to some stupid made-up fairy tale creature, Dan argued from where he'd been sitting on the wooden crate. Come on, don't be like that. We searched all up and down this damn thing when there's nothing going to get us back down. At least not without a broken leg. So let's go make some friends with the scary river monster in the bottom of the shipwreck. It's a real-life horror game, Dan. We're supposed to be doing sketchy shit. That's what we came for, right? Steve pressed as he stood over Dan. Alright, fucking fine. Let's go get this sorted, I guess. Dan sighed as he stood up and pushed Steve ahead. You're going first, though. So, what do we say to it? Dan asked once they were both standing in front of the altar again. Please get our asses off this ship or something? I don't know. Not the praying type myself. Steve answered as he looked around. Right then, on our knees, I suppose. He added with a grunt as he knelt down in front of the altar. Does feel bloody strange though, right? Yeah, well, we're about to pray to something they probably bought on Amazon. Bet a 6-year-old Chinese girl made that shit. Dan, maybe don't piss the thing off that we're supposed to ask to get us off the ship, Steve warned, scooching a little closer to the statue. He don't mean nothing by it. He's just hangry is all, he whispered to the deity on the shrine. Right then, assume the position. Alright. Shit. This is the stupidest thing you've ever made me do, Dan sighed as he knelt down next to him. The Jesus freaks are going to be all over the bloody comment section, talking about how I ought not to be praying to false gods. I can hear it already. Just, I'll take the lead, alright? Steve said as he closed his eyes and bowed his head. Hello there, Mr. River God. Me and my friend here were really hoping you'd have it in your heart to help us get off this ship. Especially in the same place when we got on it. We'd really owe you one. Ain't that right, Dan? Huh? Oh, yeah, right. It'd be a big help, I guess. And Sibala Wooty Woo, and other magic words. I'm telling you, we didn't do it right. You pissed him off. Just like I said you would.
Steve argued with Dan on the ship's deck about an hour later.
We need to go back and be serious about it this time. I don't want to be up here all night, do you? Okay, for real this time.
Steve huffed as they both knelt in front of the statue again.
I'm going to be honest with you, mate. I'm not comfortable with this at all.
Dan said from behind him.
Something about it just doesn't feel right. Got to at least try so we can get off the ship. So suck it up,
Steve said as he psyched himself up.
Here goes. Honourable God of the river, we kneel before you today. Huh, Dave was right. That's really upsetting them.
Sarah said as we watched them finally get the idea and pray for real.
That man really knows how to mess with people, that's for sure. Just glad it's them and not me. Yeah, same. Dan looks like he's about to cry.
Oh look, they want the ladder. Stagehand just tossed it up to the deck. We should start getting ready. Bet they come straight back here when they find it. I told Sarah as we watched the rolled up rope ladder flop down onto the ship. Wait, was that Dave? Did he throw the ladder up there? I asked when I noticed him walk into view from the other side of the wreckage.
Huh, yeah, it looks like. But he's going back into hiding now,
Sarah answered as we watched him vanish into the trees near the bank.
Wonder what that was about.
Hey, you two got eyes on the stagehand who was supposed to be handling the ladder? He wasn't there when he should have been. We heard Dave's voice suddenly ask from the comms. No, he's not there, and we don't see him on any of the cameras anywhere. What was that all about? I asked once I flipped through the feed and couldn't find him anywhere in the area. Yeah, he wasn't there when it was time to throw the replacement ladder up, so I had to do it. Just get ready. Thing 1 and Thing 2 just passed by headed your way. They should be at the pub in a few minutes. They're going to be really rattled and really exhausted, so really let them have it. He told us before he went silent again. The man's sick. I chuckled before getting a few more things into position and straightening up my costume. Oh my goodness, you men look to be having a difficult morning. Is everything all right? I asked in my fake accent as they walked right through the pub's doors.
Oh, get fucked and stay fucked,
Dan grumbled as he walked past me and plopped down at the bar.
On a bloody boat all morning, praying to some ooga booga shit. Dan, be nice,
Steve scolded as I joined him at the bar.
Can we trouble you for a large amount of alcohol, please? Thank you.
Perhaps you should rest, recuperate, then try again later this evening. Things in this place tend to reveal themselves at the night,
I suggested as they were in the process of drinking themselves inside out.
I mean, they do have a point. And my feet hurt and I'm just absolutely knackered. I could do with a nap, wake up to a spot of coffee,
Steve admitted as he sat back on his stool against the bar.
Yes, that sounds splendid. And they say the river god visits his worshippers in their sleep. Perhaps he'll pay you a visit now that you've prayed to him.
I teased as I stood to leave.
Oh, he better fucking not. Can't deal with much more of this shit, Dan said as he left. Sorry about him. He gets that way when he's hungry, or terrified for his life.
Steve apologized to me before following him out. They just left, headed back to the hotel. I told Dave as soon as they were gone. You doing it now? Nah, if they're resting, I'm going to do the same. I'll start screwing with them when they're out tonight. Then once they get all tuckered out again, we'll do it again. If we wait until they're absolutely exhausted and terrified, that'll get them to question their sanity from then on, Dave explained. Just let me know when they're up and about. Oh, and find that asshole who abandoned his post at the ship. Tell Sarah to give his ass a proper kicking for that, and tell him we don't need him anymore. Roger, roger, I said as I started cleaning up the mess the two had left behind. A few hours later, the doors to the pub opened again, as the two walked in. But this time,
Is everything all right?
I asked, almost forgetting to use my fake accent. The looks on their faces took me by surprise. It wasn't the same kind of rattled they'd been since they arrived, but a more genuine look of actual concern. "Gentlemen?"
"That fucker at the hotel. Something ain't right about him," Dan said as he walked by.
Must mean Jamie, I thought to myself as I eased them into a couple of chairs.
"Coffee. Please, for the love of God, coffee for the both of us,"
Steve begged as he leaned back in his seat.
"Of course.
One moment and I will return with your coffee for you," I told them before disappearing into the kitchen. But before I got the coffee, I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. Something about the way those two were acting made me want to check on Jamie. "What the hell?" I whispered to myself once I found him on the camera. What I saw was Jamie, exactly where he was supposed to be. But that was only if Dan and Steve were headed back to the hotel. He would have known that they were here, so he didn't have any need to be there. And not just that, he was standing weird. I understand Jamie really is an unusually tall man. Not a full 7 feet, but damn close. And he was standing crooked, all hunched over forward and leaning over the front desk. That's weird. Guess he's really into the role. Freak those two out, I thought before making their coffee. "All right, gentlemen, here's your coffee," I said as I walked out of the kitchen carrying a tray, holding 2 mugs and a plate of snickerdoodle cookies. "I have some cookies for you, but I believe you call them biscuits where you are from, yes?" I asked as I sat the tray down on the table between them.
"Oh, that's marvellous,"
Steve said with a soft sigh as he let the tension free from his shoulders.
"Dan, you ought to try one. Not bad."
Right, Dan said back as he finished a sip of his coffee.
That's the spot,"
he groaned with a piece of cookie still in his mouth.
"Hey, Steve, I was just thinking, what if gangs were separated up into kinds of biscuits, say, like? Could you imagine just walking down the street in Detroit and a man pops out and points a gun at you, like, 'Yo, man, what kind of cookie you like? Oh, you a snickerdoodle?' And then he shoots you right in the face."
"Stupid git." Steve laughed, causing them to both chuckle back and forth for some time as they drank their coffee.
"Right, looks like the sun's going down."
"Ugh, shit," Dan complained when he looked out the window and saw that it had finally gotten dark outside. "Come on, up you get," Steve said, trying to motivate Dan out of his chair and onto his feet. "Let's get it over with." "Be careful out there, gentlemen. Some parts of the village are less welcoming than others," I warned ominously as they left. "Dave, they're headed to the village now," I said into my comm once they were far enough away. "Headed that way now. You and Sarah ever figure out what happened to the AWOL stagehand?" She hasn't said anything about it," I told him as I gathered up the dishes onto a tray and carried them back into the kitchen. "I'll let you know if I hear anything, though. I'm going to go lay down for a while in my little hideout." "Lie. It's lie down. Gotta watch that when you're in character. Like you speak English from a textbook," Dave told me as I saw him on one of the cameras as he descended into one of his passages. Yeah, I mumbled as I hit the switch to open my hidden space. "Scare him once for me," I added before falling down onto my small cot and closing my eyes. A sound from inside the pub woke me up. Like someone bumped into one of the chairs and knocked it across the floor. "They're back already?" I thought to myself as I sat up and opened the camera app. "Oh, no, they're still wandering around out there," I said under my breath when I saw them creeping around inside one of the half-burned houses. "So who's in the pub? Jamie?" "No," I thought as I switched the cameras to one mounted on the pub behind the bar. I could see someone standing there in the middle of the room, looking from one side to the other, back and forth, scanning over the whole area. It was the stagehand that disappeared at the ship. I started to get in touch with Sarah and let her know I'd found him, but then something caused me to stop. It was the way he was moving.
Once he began to walk, I could see his steps were very awkward and heavy, like he wasn't so much walking as leaning forward and catching himself before he fell. All of a sudden, something came over me and I lost all urge to leave my tiny little room and confront him. In fact, I was glad I was in here when he walked in. Something wasn't right. I watched quietly as he lumbered around the pub, seemingly looking for someone. I can't say why for sure, but a cold shiver ran down my spine as I watched him place his hands over the bar and lean over to the other side to see what was behind it. And then he started making his way towards the kitchen. I could feel my heart begin to race as the sound of his heavy thudding footsteps got closer and closer, me watching him on the camera feed, and he reached out and pushed the door out of his way. I fought to keep my breath quiet as I listened to him surge around the small kitchen just a few feet away from me. I could see what was happening. There wasn't a camera in that room. All I could do was listen as pots and pans crashed to the floor as he knocked random objects off of the shelves. I just bit my tongue and watched the camera in the pub, waiting to see him walk back out. I sat there for what felt like forever, too afraid to move but not exactly knowing why. Maybe he's drunk or something, I thought to myself, trying to talk myself out of being afraid of one of my co-workers. But it didn't work. I couldn't bring myself to step out of my tiny hiding spot. I stayed there until he finally gave up and staggered back out of the pub and into the night. "Holy shit, Sarah, did you see that?" I said into the comm once he was gone. "Say what? What's going on?" She asked back a few seconds later. "Something wrong?" "Yeah, something happened. The arsehole stagehand just scared the living shit out of me. You didn't see him try to tear the kitchen down?" "See him what? Hold on. What the hell happened in there?" She gasped once I assumed she saw the mess he'd left behind. "The kitchen's even worse. I was in my room when he walked in and I just had a weird feeling, so I stayed there until he left. I've been watching those two idiots bumbling through the village," she said apologetically. "I'm sorry. I'll figure out what his deal is. You just take it easy for a while. If they start to head that way before you're ready, I'll take over." "Yeah, okay, thanks." I told her as I went straight back to my room and shut the door. Firmly. "Hey, they're wrapping up and heading back your way," I heard Sarah's voice on the comm a little while later as I stared at the far wall of my space. "You need me to take over?" "That's okay, I got it." I sighed as I stood up from the cot with a stretch. "How'd Dave do?" "Had them scared out of their shadows the whole time," she told me, laughing a little as she spoke. "Makes my job a little easier, I guess." I mumbled as I walked out of the room and into the still half-demolished kitchen. "Gentlemen, how was the exploration of our beautiful village?" I asked cheerfully as they entered the pub. "My arse beautiful," Dan growled as he stomped past me. "Waking fucking nightmare, that is." "I'm not apologizing for him this time," Steve added. "I've never been so scared in my entire life. Fuck this whole place, top to bottom. I'm hungry." "You were right. They were shook up pretty bad. Dave must have gave them the business out there," I told Sarah after they left. "Can't wait to see how they handle the hallway." "Me either," Sarah replied from where she was at the time. "Especially with all we put into that one. It's gonna be great." Once they were both in their room and settled, I watched excitedly as the stagehands went to work. I made sure I was watching when they left their room that morning. I've been waiting all this time, so I was sure I wasn't going to miss this. Dan grunted as he stepped out into the hallway. "Yep. Oi, Steve. Can you answer a question for me if it's not too much trouble?" He called over his shoulder back into the room. "What is it?" Steve asked back. "When we leave the room to go downstairs, what way do we turn?" Turn right, why?" "Want to bet money on it?" Dan asked sharply. "We turn right, you know that. Don't be a tosser." "Stephen, get your ass out in the hallway, now!" Dan demanded as he stared in alarm at the cause of the commotion. "God, what Holy shit! The wall's on the wrong side, he said, redirecting mid-sentence. That was on that side. Now it's on this side. That's the same painting and everything, Dan. What the hell's going on?
I was basically cackling as they forced themselves to turn and walk the opposite direction to get back downstairs. What happened was that Dave helped come up with a contraption, a movable wall, so that it just looks like a normal part of the wall. But when you're ready, you can loosen it from its place and move it down the hall and fix it back into place like it was always there. He even made sure that the opposite side was a mirror image of the other. Once they fell asleep, the stagehands ran up and very carefully, very quietly switched the wall around. Now they'd gotten used to it being the other way. It almost threw them both into a legitimate panic by the time they reached the pub where I was waiting. That time they almost ran past Jamie, who was still hunched over in his spot behind the desk.
Gentlemen, is something the matter?
Don't you dare! What was that? How'd you do it? Dan barked, shoving a finger in my face.
The what? I'm afraid I do not know what you're talking about, I assure you,
I answered, choking back a giggle.
The wall! The bloody wall jumping all over the fucking hall like some haunted house shit! What did you do?
Dan snapped again.
It would appear the river god has visited you last night. He is very mischievous, you see.
I responded with my predetermined lines.
It seems no harm was done, yes?
I added with a smile that I made sure didn't reach my eyes, just to make it extra creepy.
Oh, you fucking...
He grunted with his finger in my face.
I know this,
I interrupted before he could finish apologizing for Dan. As I waved them to their usual table, I couldn't help but think of something. So when the opportunity came, I ducked away into the kitchen. Hey, Sarah, you ever figure out what the deal was with that stagehand? I asked into the comm. Then, after a bit of a pause, she answered.
Not yet. Nobody's laid eyes on him since you trashed the pub,
she said, as her voice came through the other end.
Probably hiding somewhere until it's time to wrap up.
I don't know. That doesn't make me feel any better, I told her quietly as I searched around the kitchen.
Hey, what's up with Dave?
She suddenly said, apparently from where she'd been looking at the camera feeds. What are you talking about?
He's limping. Camera 72, 73.
She answered with some concern in her voice.
Hey Dave, are you okay over there?
Yeah, they just fell. That tunnel we built from the courthouse to the shops on the other side of the street?
He asked with a soft sigh as he sat down to rest. Yeah, what about it? I asked before Sarah had a chance.
Apparently we dug the goddamn thing right on top of another tunnel. Floor collapsed and I fell right through the son of a bitch into another tunnel.
He explained as I could see him rubbing his leg from the camera. You gonna be okay? I asked.
Yeah, I just hit my knee. A little rest and some more of those migraine pills and I should be alright. But guess where that other tunnel leads to? That damn cave next to the ship. Remember when we found that on the preliminary survey? That little crack towards the back end? Comes right up to it. Don't know where it goes in the other direction yet.
I'll go check it out when those two leave the pub, I volunteered. I've been in this place since they got here. Any excuses, really.
You sure? I'm not sure about how sound that tunnel really is, especially in the other direction,
Dave warned as he fished around for his bottle of painkillers.
I've been spelunking before.
I know what to look for, I assured him, getting some fresh coffee ready for the two.
Oh my god, hurry up and go!
I thought anxiously to myself as I sat behind the bar. For whatever reason, they were lingering longer than usual, and all I wanted was them to leave so I could go and explore the new passage. Or the old one under the new one, more like. Finally, I sighed as they both left the pub, arguing about something as they walked through the door. Once they were far enough away, I rushed into my room and took my costume off, swapping it for some clothes that were easier to move around in before I slowly slipped out of the pub and scurried behind the nearest building to stay out of sight as I made my way to the entrance hidden inside the courthouse. Okay, I'm in the first tunnel, I said to Dave as I hopped off the ladder. How far to the Oh, never mind, I can see it from here. I stopped myself when I saw the massive hole in the floor. How did you not die? The universe must really want me to torment those two guys a little more, he answered. Just be careful. If you get killed, I'll never hear the end of it. Your concern is touching. Might tear up a bit. I joked as I put my head down into the opening. Sun should be setting in a little while. You gonna go chase them around a little? I think they found the key to that room you set up. By what they were saying at the pub. Yeah, I guess. But I'll give them a little head start since I'm gonna lay it on thick tonight, he answered as I eased myself down into the lower tunnel. You're starting to break up. The signal gets a little choppy down there, so get in and get out. I don't want you unreachable for too long, okay? Got it? Okay, back in a few, I said as I clicked my flashlight on and started my journey into the dark passage. As I walked down the newly discovered tunnel, I couldn't help but start to wonder what it could have been built for, or why it led to the cave near the shipwreck. The hell does the postcard village need a secret tunnel under it? I asked myself as I felt along the walls with my free hand. That's when my nose caught a whiff of something bad. Something smells like it wandered down here and died, I thought, almost gagging from the stench. After walking deep in, the smell started to fade, or I started to get used to it. But before long, I could see the soft glow of the lights further down. A warm red glow, almost like fire, but it didn't flicker and dance like a flame would. I slowly inched forward, curiosity getting the better of me, and eventually I could almost see around the corner until... What the hell are you doing down there? Sarah's voice suddenly cracked through my comm, rattling my whole body in the process. What? I barely just got down here, I snapped, a little mad at her for scaring me like that. Barely? You've been there for 3 hours, not answering. Goddamn comm, she said as the signal started breaking up again. What? Nah. I thought out loud as I pulled my phone out and checked the clock. Bullshit, I whispered when I saw a little more than 3 hours had actually passed. How'd I lose track of time that much? Get your ass back up here now! The signal came back through just long enough for Sarah to scold me. On my way, I answered, turning to head back in the direction I came, walking a little faster, thinking that if I'd been walking for hours, I'd be walking for 3 hours to get back. But in a few minutes I was back at the collapsed ceiling. Well, that's not right, I mumbled as I stared up at the opening. About time! They're on their way back right now. Go get dressed! Sarah instructed as she pushed me back towards the kitchen. Move it! Half the stagehands weren't where they're supposed to be. And you were off cave diving somewhere. Put your clothes on and get ready. I'll stall them if I have to, but hurry up, she told me before turning and walking behind the bar. A few minutes later I could hear Dan and Steve as they walked in, exhausted by the sounds of it. I knew by that point Dave was supposed to be on his way to the hotel. That was the point where he was supposed to be waiting in their room. He'd only let them get a quick glance before climbing out of the window and vanishing into the trees on the ground. And that's when I heard the scratch of my comm. Hey, where the hell's Jamie got to? Dave asked before I could make it out of the kitchen, so I stopped to see what he was talking about. Huh? He should be at the front desk. What's going on? I asked back. The hell he is. I'm standing at the front desk right now and he's not here. You're screwing with me, right? I asked once I opened the camera app and switched to the front desk feed. Dave, I'm looking at him right now. He's literally standing at the desk right in front of you. What? Fuck off. No, he isn't. I'm looking at the front desk. I know, Dave. I'm looking at you looking at the front desk. I argued until I took the time to really look at Jamie. His tall figure hunched over and perfectly motionless as he stared straight ahead at Dave. Hey, you really can't see him? You swear, Dave? I asked nervously. Don't play with me, Dave, because you're freaking me the fuck out right now, I warned as I kept my eyes on the video feed. There's no one here with me, he answered, his words slowing down as I could tell he was starting to get a little nervous himself. Just open your camera and look for yourself, I told him, knowing he had his phone since the comm ran off their own app that was installed on all our devices. Yeah, alright, he said as he pulled his phone out clumsily through his awkward costume. I swear to God, if I open this thing and find out you're messing with me. Oh, shit. He spoke down into a frightened whisper as he found the right camera and apparently saw the same thing I was seeing. That's Jamie, all right. But he looks ancient, I finished for him, noticing it at the same time. I could tell it was Jamie, but his clothes looked like they were about to rot off his body. His eyes were sunken in, and he had lines of old age carved into every corner of his once barely middle-aged face. I leaned in closer to the screen to get a better look, and that's when his head violently snapped to the side, glaring straight into the camera, straight into my eyes. "Oh, hell no!" I heard Dave shout right before he turned and bolted out of the hotel and out into the street. About the same time he did that, I heard something. The creak of a board. Someone heavy was walking the front porch. I quickly switched the camera to the outside view of the pub, just in time to see the withered, decrepit Jamie slowly creeping toward the entrance. "Everyone get in here now!" I shouted through the door of the kitchen, causing all their heads to whip around my direction.
What the hell? You're supposed to stay in camp.
"Sarah, shut the hell up and get back in here now!" I hissed, cutting her off before she could finish. "You two," I said, pointing at Dan and Steve as they sat near the table. "Now!" Seeing the desperate look on my face, they all quickly got the idea and hurried back into the kitchen. As they passed by, something caught my eye as the groans of the boards outside grew louder and louder. I couldn't help but look up as the lights on the ceiling started to turn red. Once they were in the kitchen, I popped the secret lock to my room and shoved them all inside ahead of me, cramming them all into place before wedging myself behind them and closing the door.
What's going on?
"Shh," I hushed Dan as I opened my phone and switched the camera feed to the inside of the pub. A few seconds later, the door slowly swung open as the aged, almost decaying Jamie stepped inside. After that, all I could do was slowly put my finger to my lips to tell them to stay quiet. Then we all watched in silence as Jamie paused in the center of the room and began to very slowly scan it. In no hurry, he took his time taking in every small detail of the pub, like he'd never seen it before. And once he was satisfied, to our horror, he began slowly creeping towards the kitchen. My heart raced as I watched him from the camera as he reached out and twisted the doorknob. By then, the light bulb and even the screen on my phone had begun to take on a harsh red glow. That's when we all heard the sound of the door softly bounce off the wall once it had been opened and disappeared from the camera's view. I could feel everyone around me begin to tremble as we listened to the sound of footsteps on the other side of the hidden door, the only thing separating us from him. That's when we heard the voice. The voice. Not Jamie's. Definitely not Jamie's. It sounded like the last words of a dying man, but spoken through a long hallway.
"You're in here somewhere. I know you are. Now, 5 minutes from now. What difference does it make in the grand scheme of things?"
The gravelly voice asked, chilling the blood in our veins in an instant.
"I'll find you eventually."
Something about those words, the way they were spoken, the ambiguity of it all, but at the same time the absolute certainty of what he meant. All I wanted was to cover my ears and drown out the sound, but before I could, a loud boom sounded from somewhere in the distance. Rifling through the cameras, I eventually found the cause. Dave had set off one of the pyrotechnics from the set, sending a massive fireball into the sky and an earth-shattering racket across the village. After a few moments of stillness, we could hear the shuffling of feet from the other side of the door as Jamie finally left the kitchen. He left to investigate the source of the explosion, the sickly red infecting the light soon fading as well.
"Was that part of the bit?"
Dan asked quietly from his cramped place beside me. All I could do was slowly shake my head, not even wanting to make a sound of a whisper. I just watched the screen as Jamie lumbered slowly out of the pub. We all stood there packed together, until long after we were sure Jamie was gone, before slowly easing our way out of the small room and into the kitchen.
That really wasn't part of the game?
Dan asked again.
Shut up!
I hissed as I slapped my hand over his mouth. I tried to explain what I saw happen on the camera feed before trying to get Dave on the comm, before Jamie got too close to him.
Dave, you there?
Yeah, I just ducked into one of the passageways. I'm over by the cafe. I'm doubling back around your way now. If it's clear, get down into the tunnel. He knows there's something up with the kitchen, but I don't think he knows how to find the tunnels. Dave told me quietly from his end. Just wait for me. Trying to round up the stagehands, but... What's the matter? I asked when he paused for a moment. I've only been able to get a hold of 3 of them. There's supposed to be 10. Where the hell is everyone?
I think they all just left.
Dan asked once me and Sarah finally convinced him we weren't doing a bit. Honestly, I hope that's what happened, I admitted as we lowered ourselves down into the tunnel. I really don't want to start thinking of an alternative explanation. Oh, there you are, Dave said a few minutes later, his head popping over the entrance to the tunnel. Dan, nice to finally meet you in person. Sorry it wasn't under better conditions. He went on as he climbed down to join the rest of us. Anything happen? He asked as he started removing pieces of his costume and tossing them aside. Doesn't look like it, I answered as I flipped through the different camera feeds, as the few stagehands Dave could find climbed down behind him. Oh no, Dave, look, I said grimly as I switched to one of the cameras, near where the trail to the ship begins. What did you find? He asked as he took the phone from me.
What's happening?
Dan asked, looking over our shoulders.
Who's he got?
He almost shrieked when he saw events unfolding on the screen. Nobody said anything after that. We all just stared at the screen in horror as we watched Jamie standing over one of the stagehands who was trying desperately to crawl away from him, his hands and feet slipping in the mud from the soft rain that had begun to fall.
Should we, go help?
Steve suddenly asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. But nobody said anything. We all knew we wouldn't be any help, even if we could get there in time. Jamie, his back now arched over like the end of a cane and his skin looking like it was almost ready to fall off from his body, slowly reached down and grabbed the man by his ankle and began to drag him over to the brick wall at one of the buildings.
Hey, what are you doing?
I snapped at Dave when he suddenly turned the phone away to only where he could see it. I feel like you don't need to see whatever is about to happen. He trailed off as he stayed fixated on the phone. A few seconds later, his whole body lurched all at once. We all stood there, dead silent, Dave's free hand covering his mouth in alarm until he finally lowered it to speak. We need to get the hell out of here. Now. The sharp twinge of fear I felt in the moment is almost impossible to describe. But for the sake of understanding, Dave made his living off terrifying his audience. His last book was almost recalled because there were so many reports of it giving readers actual panic attacks. He understands what scares people better than almost anyone, and he was on the verge of a nervous breakdown.
What did you see? What did he do to that man?
Dan asked as his voice began to tremble, but Dave didn't answer. He just looked Dan in the eye and slowly shook his head.
Okay, are you going to at least tell us why you made us come down here?
Sarah suddenly asked, pushing herself to the front of the group. The cameras. There aren't any down here, Dave finally answered as he stayed focused on the phone.
Why would we be worried about the cameras?
She questioned, but by then I had already started to figure out what he was thinking. Whatever is going on out there, it's not Jamie. I know that's not Jamie, but it's in his body, and that means he's got Jamie's phone. Jamie's phone that can access the feed for all the cameras around here. 137 individual cameras, each and every one, all over the village and the surrounding area, except for our private quarters and the hidden passageways. So, what's your plan? I asked, hoping he even had one.
Emilio, you got it, right? He asked in response, turning to one of the stagehands he brought along with him. Yes, I bring, he answered, holding up a small tool bag. That's Emilio, our explosives and pyrotechnics guy. He's the guy who blew up the rock we ran into when we were digging the tunnel before you guys got here, Dave began to explain. And he's what? Gonna blow us all to shit? Save the guy out there some trouble? Dan asked indignantly. No. We found another tunnel under this one, and it leads... The boat's still there, I said before he could finish, realizing what he was planning. But it's blocked off, we can't get through. That's why I told Emilio to go grab some stuff before we got here. By the time whatever that thing is up there hears the boom and figures out where we are, we'll be on a boat hauling ass downriver, Dave told us as he patted Emilio on the shoulder. So, everyone, you first, he said once we got to the opening to the lower tunnel. You know what still bothers me? Sarah asked as she climbed down into the tunnel beside me. What? I asked back as I dug around for my flashlight. Where'd all the missing stagehands really go? Shh, I don't want to hear you talking about that, Dave suddenly snapped as he dropped down next to us. Do not bring that up. Again. Understand? Come, follow, Emilio said softly as he led the way down the passage. Hurry, please. You heard the man, Dave said as he waved us forward. Faster. I don't think we have time to piss away, he warned, glancing over his shoulder. Hey, I haven't got the chance to ask yet, but what did you find down the other way? He whispered as he walked up next to me. Oh, there wasn't much as far as I saw. I think an animal crawled down there and died or something, at least from the smell. And before I turned and came back, I saw this kinda glow, I guess. Lights, maybe? Like those red emergency lights, you know? I quietly told him. Why? Just in case we have to double back, I want to know what we might run into. Everyone stay back. Let Emilio rig the explosives, Dave instructed once we got close to the cave. You got it? He asked Emilio, who had already started making his way to the rock that separated us from the chamber. Yes, no come closer, he told us before we could get any nearer to where he had sat his bag down and was carefully placing the contents out beside it. But before he could get to work, we heard the voice. I was wondering when you'd get here. The words froze each and every one of us in place. Jamie, or whatever was in Jamie, coldly spoke through the small gap between the rock and the cave. Before any of us knew what happened, his hand slot through the gap and grabbed a handful of Emilio's clothes. As Emilio pulled away, in panic, we heard the pop of Jamie's arm as it was torn away from the rest of his body. Emilio stumbled back, Jamie's putrid, rotting arm still hanging from his shirt. His screams of terror echoed off the walls of the tunnel as he wildly drug himself back away from the cave and back to the group, kicking Jamie's detached arm away in the process. Unfortunate. The thing in Jamie's body sighed softly like nothing important had happened. Flesh, bone, these feeble husks, they never last. He almost laughed as he glared at us through the narrow crack, as he scratched at his face with the remaining hand, peeling layers of skin away from his cheek each time. Who are you? I couldn't help but fearfully ask when the opportunity came, and felt the cold wave of horror wash over me as I drew his attention and his eyes met mine. Why spoil the mystery? He replied with a toothy grin. You will know soon enough. But for now, perhaps a game? He proposed, his gravelly voice almost a whisper. Let's deceive you, and you, and you, he said as he pointed at us one after the other. All of you can live long enough to outlast this decaying shell of mine. If you win, you'll live out the rest of your lives. Lose, and I will show you in your last few moments on this earth just how slowly time can pass.
Run! Run! Move! Go! Dave suddenly roared, shoving us hard back down into the tunnel. No talking back! Go! We didn't argue. We all turned and ran as fast as our legs could carry us in the opposite direction. Before we knew it, we'd passed under the collapsed opening and we made our way towards the other end of the tunnel, and the mysterious red glow. As the light came into view, the smell hit me again. The stench of death and rot hit me like a truck and almost caused me to stop altogether. But I pushed ahead until... oh my God. I gasped once I saw the source of the smell, and the answer to what happened to the rest of the stagehands. Piles and piles of dead bodies lined the walls of the open round chamber. Too many to just be the missing stagehands. It was almost a whole village worth, most stacked up on top of the other, some nailed to the walls, mutilated, barely recognizable as the humans they were in life. Then, in the middle of the mind-numbing revulsion and terror, I found the source of the glow. A massive symbol on the floor of the chamber, a giant circle filled with a pattern of arcing lines and smaller circles, crosses, crescents, and loops. It pulsed with that ominous red light. How, I couldn't say for sure. It wasn't from heat or electricity or chemicals. But there it was in the middle of the room of unimaginable carnage, resting under an abandoned village in the middle of nowhere.
It seems you found my collection.
That sinister voice suddenly spoke from somewhere I couldn't see. My head darted around looking for where it was coming from, until one of the dead bodies had raised its head and was speaking.
A sacrifice we're happy to make, I'm sure.
The corpse continued to speak, but quickly rotting away to dust as the words left its already decaying mouth.
Time is wasting.
Another body spoke from the other side of the chamber, almost falling apart before it could finish the sentence. Then the voice began to surround us, emanating from the army of corpses that encircled us as they crumbled away one after the other.
What the hell?
Dan whimpered from beside me as he watched, paralyzed by fear and confusion until Dave and Steve gave us both a hard push back out of the chamber. Back up! We're going back up! Dan shouted as we all ran back to the opening to the new tunnel and back up to the courthouse. Get to the town hall! There's another passage from there to the cafe. Then we can get to the pier from there. Take one of the boats and get the fuck out of this hellhole! My hands still shaking, I pulled myself up from the opening to the cafe before turning to pull Sarah up behind me. Don't wait, just go, Dave told us as he came up last. And be quiet. Stay out of the line of sight of the cameras if you can. There was only one camera in the cafe itself, and we all had to get down on our hands and knees to crawl behind the bar to keep it from catching us, which slowed us down a lot. But eventually we all made it outside and ducked into the bushes and trees behind the building. From there we crept through the woods towards the pier near the edge of town. Once it was in sight we stopped and waited, not wanting to run out and expose ourselves if we sat frozen in place until we thought the coast was clear. After a few minutes of stillness, we all snuck out of the tree line and hurried across the road to the pier. The only problem was that, from where we were and how the pier was set up, we couldn't tell until we were standing on the boards over the water that the boats, every last one of them, were gone.
They always go for the boats.
An icy, malicious voice mocked from behind us as we all stood there, trapped over the freezing cold water. I quickly turned to see the decayed length of the marine rope swinging from Jamie's rotting hand.
If you just ran into the woods, you might have made it,
he added, that awful, toothy smile returning to his face as he saw the looks of hopelessness sink onto our faces. And then he started walking. I knew it would probably kill me, but I spun to jump off the side of the pier into the icy water, choosing that over whatever the alternative was. But before I could, a hand grabbed the collar of my shirt. Stop! Look! He told me, turning me back towards Jamie as his foot touched the first board and crumpled under the weight of his body. My eyes locked onto him as every step chipped away at his bones and tore at his muscle. The effort of every single inch closer he got wore away at what was left of the rotting vestal that used to be Jamie. Skin slid away and flopped into the river. Teeth fell and clattered through the cracks in the boards. Hair blew away in the breeze until there was nothing more than just a skeleton. We all let out a heavy sigh of relief until we all heard a hard, sharp shriek. I looked down to see the skinless bones of Jamie's hands wrapped around Sarah's ankle. My eyes met hers as the skin on her face began to liquefy. She fell to the pier, howling in agony as her own body began to wither and decay. Every second a decade right in front of us until only her empty clothes remained. I had just enough time to steal a glance at the lifeless but victorious and grinning skeleton of Jamie before it fell away into dust and disappeared into the wind, leaving those of us who were left at the end of the pier not knowing what to do next. "So what now?" asked Dave days later as we sat at the hotel of the nearest town to the village. "For you, that's your choice. Dan said him and Steve are taking a break. A long break to recover from all of this. And the stagehands? They said they didn't see anything. Don't want to end up in a padded room, I guess. What about you?" "First, I'm tracking down those people who said they were there when everyone disappeared. I think it's safe to say they were probably telling the truth," he said as he leaned back in his chair and ran his hands through his hair. "I'm going to find out what all that was. This doesn't slide. You have to know for sure. Somewhere, someone knows something." "You're planning on going back?" I asked, shocked by all I was hearing. "Eventually. But I'll be way more prepared next time, and I'll know what I'm dealing with by then. The way I see it, that was all my fault. So I owe it to everyone who didn't make it," he explained as he stared up at the ceiling. "Right now, though, we have a lot of questions to answer. You got your story straight, don't you?" he asked right before several loud knocks on the door rattled through the small hotel room. "Because I'm guessing that's probably gonna be the police."